Manda was Orochimaru's main summon and the largest snake in the Naruto world, which is saying something because Orochimaru has several gigantic snakes. Manda is by far the biggest and the strongest. And this summon is so strong, it's almost mind-boggling. And it's also kind of strange that such a cool, epic, powerful, and just iconic summon is used so little in the Naruto series. So in this video, let's talk about Manda and how strong it actually was. The first thing we have to take a look at is that Manda kind of dwarfs Katsuyu and Gamabunta. It is summoned for the first time during the three-way deadlock in the Search for Tsunade arc, not by Orochimaru, but actually by Kabuto. He only uses Orochimaru's blood, and also that seal on Orochimaru's rotten arm to summon the giant snake. And that's because Orochimaru, with his arms rotten like that, couldn't use hand signs because of heroes and everything. So Kabuto had to be the one to summon it for him, and the first time we take a look at that thing is in that 2-page spread when we see the 3 summons in the deadlock formation. We can already see that Gamabunta is so much bigger than the snakes Orochimaru had summoned before because he literally tramples the snakes and makes them sink into the swamp Jiraiya had summoned before. But Manda is even bigger than Gamabunta and Katsuyu. Manda's like overlooking the two of them from above. And that's when things really start getting interesting because, first of all, the design of Manda is simply amazing. The purple color combined with those black stripes and also just how the face of Manda is built with its head and those horns. Kishimoto went all out with the design of the snake. And we see that the snake itself has a lot of history with the other Sannin and the other Sannin summons. Manda provokes Gamabunta saying that he really wants some dried frog snacks, and Gamabunta rebukes by saying, "I have always wanted a snakeskin wallet," before they start fighting. But what's actually more interesting is how terrified of Manda Kabuto is. Because when Manda gets summoned there in the three-way deadlock, he is pissed. He says, "Orochimaru, you better not summon me into such a mess. I'm gonna eat you first." And Kabuto, who is in a terrible state because he took a Rasengan from Naruto, not in a good shape whatsoever, is bleeding. "Oh, please calm down, Lord Manda. Lord Manda, I promise substantial compensation. Please help us out here." He is essentially groveling to this snake. And Orochimaru is like quiet and just observing the situation. Orochimaru himself doesn't look terrified of Manda, but it's interesting to see that Orochimaru doesn't say a single thing to his own summon there. Unlike Tsunade and Jiraiya, who talk to Gamabunta and Katsuyu. And Manda, when Kabuto talks to him, says, "Who's talking to you? Don't you dare speak to me." And in order for Manda to work alongside them and fight Katsuyu and Gamabunta, he demands 100 human sacrifices. So are those sacrifices for Manda to eat? I guess that's the implication, right? But I have to imagine even 100 people wouldn't be nearly enough for a single meal for such a gargantuan creature. It's a demand that Manda makes, but Kabuto and Orochimaru don't really agree to it. They just kind of consent, I suppose, because they don't say anything. And in his inner monologue, Kabuto thinks, "Oh, Lord Orochimaru is Manda's master, but if Manda learns that Lord Orochimaru can't perform jutsu, he'll soon betray him." Which means that Kabuto was at least worried that Manda would turn against him, and he was terrified of that situation. Now, it may be just because if Manda turned against them during the fight itself against 2 other Sannin, this would mean they would certainly lose the fight, but it could also mean that Kabuto thinks Manda is stronger than Orochimaru in that state, which, honestly, Orochimaru was heavily nerfed, and as we're going to see, Manda shows some extremely interesting feats of strength. Kabuto then thinks using Manda in this situation was extremely risky, but I don't really get that. Is he complaining about it? Because literally in the previous chapter, before they summoned the jutsu, Kabuto himself called Orochimaru and screamed, "Manda!" when he realized Tsunade was going to summon her big summon. So that's his fault. I guess he's just acknowledging that in his inner monologue and is afraid of it, but what was really their other option? Orochimaru doesn't have a stronger snake than Manda, and he would have to face 2 other extremely powerful summons, so yeah, it is what it is. And of course, then we have the three-way deadlock fight, which I think is very underrated. People tend to talk more about the fight between the Sannins and Naruto and Kabuto before the big summons appear, and that's for a good reason, to be honest. Naruto uses the first successful Rasengan he's ever done against Kabuto, which is one of the best moments in the series. And also, the fight between the 3 summons only lasts for a single chapter, which isn't terribly long, but what we get there is extremely cool and well drawn in our second kaiju battle in the series. And then people are gonna say, oh my god, in Naruto Shippuden, Naruto betrayed itself because it has gigantic things fighting against each other. But I guess they didn't watch the Chunin exams, which literally ends in a climax with a massive sand monster fighting against a massive toad. The Chunin exams, the second arc of the series. And then the third arc of the series ends with a kaiju battle between a massive snake, toad, and slug. Oh, whoops. I guess kaijus were always a part of the series. Oh! In the first chapter, we learned that a massive nine-tailed fox is capable of destroying mountains by waving its tail, but Naruto betrayed itself in Naruto Shippuden because now these things are actually showing up and doing stuff. Anyways, the fight in the three-way deadlock starts, and Katsuyu, oddly enough, is the one who moves first, spitting acid. Acid's not something we see very often in the Naruto series. May kinda use it a lot in the fight against Madara in Naruto Shippuden, but this is the first time we ever see anything using acid in the Naruto series. Manda dodges the acid barrage, and the acid corrodes the rock. It's pretty powerful, but then Manda is very fast. It managed to wrap itself around Katsuyu without the slug even being able to react, pinning it into place, and goes for a bite against Katsuyu, but Gamabunta interferes and charges with his sword. But Manda bites Gamabunta's sword, stopping Gamabunta's attack, and squeezes Katsuyu so hard that she explodes into thousands of smaller slugs, which is one of her coolest abilities, to be honest. How the powers of these two summons interact was so great. The snake obviously squeezing with a very snake-like ability, and Katsuyu exploding there. After Katsuyu explodes, Manda yanks the sword out of Gamabunta's hands and tosses it with its mouth at Gamabunta, forcing Gamabunta to dodge. And we can see here with this initial exchange that Manda is doing exceptionally well against two summons which are supposed to be of the same caliber as Manda. It dealt a formidable attack to Katsuyu. Sure, Katsuyu didn't die with that squeeze attack, but it was forced to at least regroup, which took it out of the fight momentarily, and Manda also disarmed Gamabunta at the same time while they were attacking Manda simultaneously, which is crazy. Jiraiya and Gamabunta then use what's probably the largest scale fire style jutsu in the entire series, maybe even bigger than Madara's majestic Destroyer Flame. They use Gamayu Enden or Toad Flame Bomb, which combines Jiraiya spitting fire with Gamabunta spitting oil, and it forms this fireball that's several times bigger than Gamabunta himself, who is already a massive summon. When you look at this two-page spread of the fireball in all its glory, and look at the small, tiny little size of Gamabunta and Katsuyu on the side, you realize that, okay, oh god, this thing is magnificent and gigantic. It obviously deals a lot of damage, and you would have destroyed Manda if Manda didn't use what's probably one of its most overpowered abilities, the ability to skin change and substitute, just like Orochimaru. Manda leaves its skin behind, which burns within the fireball, and then burrows underground, attacking Gamabunta from below. And that's probably the craziest move Manda pulls here, because Manda attacks Gamabunta from one side, from Gamabunta's front, essentially, coming from below, but that's actually the tail, the rear end of the snake, which Gamabunta blocks with its hands. But then the head of the snake emerges from the other side of Gamabunta, also from beneath the ground, and then Manda opens its mouth. And when it does so, the mouth is actually bigger than Gamabunta himself. That's a crazy panel. And we can see here that, oh, if Tsunade and Katsuyu weren't involved, Manda would have beaten Gamabunta right here. Which makes sense because there's this cycle among the Sanin. The snake is supposed to beat the toad is supposed to beat the slug, and the slug is supposed to beat the snake. It's kind of like rock, paper, scissors, but because Orochimaru is the enemy, then Tsunade and Jiraiya are gonna fight against him. They don't have a reason to fight against each other. And this rock, paper, scissors cycle is clearly at play here because who actually beats Manda is going to be Tsunade, the one who represents the slug. It's not the slug itself, but what happens next is probably one of the coolest moves in the entire series. Tsunade lifts Gamabunta's sword, that thing which is a hunk of metal, probably like 30 meters long, and she shoves that against Manda's head, pinning its mouth to the ground and essentially nullifying the snake for the fight. Orochimaru, realizing his snake, his greatest summon, was defeated, wraps his tongue around Tsunade's neck and tries to do something, maybe choke her, maybe bring her to him, but Tsunade uni-reverses card him and pulls his own tongue towards her and punches Orochimaru, defeating him. She punches Orochimaru against Manda. He lands on his own summon, and he actually caves in the snake skin there. Manda is pissed off for what Tsunade did to him. He says, "Look what you've done to me. I'd kill you and eat you, but I can't swallow this hole in my mouth. Next time we meet again, you'd better be ready." And Manda poofs away into white smoke, disappearing, essentially ending the fight in the Search for Tsunade arc. And if you didn't know, the way Tsunade beats Orochimaru in the anime is very different than in the manga. In the manga, after she nails Manda to the ground, she pulls Orochimaru in, punches him once, and the fight's over. She essentially one-taps Orochimaru. In the anime, however, she beats Orochimaru several times. She lands, I don't know how many punches on the guy, and with the last punch, she launches Orochimaru against Gamabunta's sword, which is piercing the ground still. So that's honestly a big difference, because it makes Tsunade feel much stronger in the manga. She only needs one punch. And in the anime, it's like she is punching, and not doing any damage to Orochimaru, which is frustrating. Like a single punch from Tsunade is supposed to melt you down. She lifted Gamabunta's freaking sword and pierced Manda with it before Manda could bite Gamabunta. That's crazy. So a punch should do a lot of damage. Regardless, what Manda does here, even though Manda loses the fight, is absolutely incredible. We see that in a 1v1 scenario, Manda would easily defeat Gamabunta. If it wasn't for Tsunade there, Gamabunta would have probably died from that bite that Manda was going to dish out. And we saw in the previous arc that Gamabunta was doing pretty well against a tail beast, the One Tail. Gamabunta is already relative to a tail beast. Gamabunta is one of the strongest summons in the Naruto world, and Manda was kinda casually dealing with him. If you're interested, you can watch my Gamabunta video after this one. And on top of fighting against Gamabunta, he was also fighting against Katsuyu, a summon of the same caliber at the same time. And not only that, but Manda was not just fighting against the summons. Jiraiya and Tsunade were also participating in the fight. Tsunade is the one who actually deals the finishing blow to Manda, and Jiraiya uses his fire style, combining it with the Toad oil. Orochimaru and Kabuto, however, they're just kinda chilling there on top of Manda's head and not doing anything. They're not contributing to the fight. Orochimaru, after he summons Manda, only does anything at all after Manda gets nailed to the ground. As I mentioned before, he wraps his tongue around Tsunade's neck. It doesn't do anything, but they are not helping the summon out during the fight. So Manda is essentially fighting a 1v4. He is fighting against Tsunade, Jiraiya, Katsuyu, and Gamabunta at the same time. And Manda was giving them a lot of trouble. Sure, I guess you could say Jiraiya was drugged, so he was nerfed. He wasn't at his best. But Manda's feats there are still extremely impressive. I guess you can comfortably say that Manda is the strongest out of the three. I'm not sure how Manda could beat Katsuyu, because Katsuyu can just kind of explode into smaller clones, but in terms of sheer strength, obviously Manda is stronger than Katsuyu. Well, if you don't count the whole body of Katsuyu, because that section that Tsunade summons to the battlefield in the three-way deadlock is only a tiny fraction of the entire slug. And that's the thing, if Gamabunta was doing pretty well against the tail beast in the arc before, and Gamabunta was gonna get handily beaten by Manda here, that means Manda would be around the same tier of strength as Shukaku at least. Maybe Manda could even take on stronger tail beasts like the 2 or 3 tails. Sure, Manda doesn't have a long-range attack as far as we know, like Gamabunta has with the water bullets, but Manda could make that up with his speed, sheer strength, and even if he gets a tail beast bomb to the face, he could use the skin change substitution. And a reason why Orochimaru may have never summoned Manda again, at least not on screen, and it's very much implied he's never really summoned Manda again, is because Manda was extremely pissed at him because of what happened during that fight. Sure, it technically wasn't Orochimaru's fault because Tsunade did it, but Orochimaru was the one who chose to summon Manda there, and Manda, being this very proud snake, doesn't like that at all. And it probably hurts a lot too, let's be real. So Manda goes away, and the next time we see it is in a very controversial scene. The final scene of the Deidara vs Sasuke fight, when Sasuke uses Manda to escape Deidara's C0, his final explosion, the most powerful blast we had ever seen up until that point in the Naruto story. Oh, a lot of people hate that, but I actually like it a lot. Now, a lot of people say that, oh, it doesn't make sense for Sasuke to summon Manda in that situation. However, I'm going to rebuke the points people make. People just tend to hate that aspect of the Deidara vs Sasuke fight because they don't like Sasuke, so they wanted Sasuke to die or whatever. And whenever Sasuke does anything, they're gonna say it's Sasuke's plot armor. Even though if Naruto did the same thing using Gamabunta to escape, for example, they wouldn't say a thing. Oh yeah, cool, Naruto escaped, that's fun! So the first thing people bring up is that Sasuke was out of chakra to summon Manda into the battlefield. And they say that because Deidara mentions, oh, you're out of chakra, you don't have your Sharingan anymore, but Deidara, 1, is not a sensory type. He was just assuming that, and Sasuke looks disheveled because of the fight that happened beforehand, not necessarily because he's out of chakra. He had to Chidori himself to defuse the nano-explosives inside of his body. He also took a few explosions from Deidara himself, which would hurt and would make him look disheveled, but that doesn't mean he's out of chakra. Number 2, if Sasuke truly was out of chakra, then Orochimaru would have emerged out of his body because Sasuke was using his chakra to suppress Orochimaru's presence. We see that when Sasuke runs completely out of chakra in the fight against Itachi, Orochimaru breaks out with the 8-headed serpent. That obviously didn't happen in the Deidara vs Sasuke fight. Number 2, sure, it does take a significant amount of chakra for you to summon a massive beast like Manda. We have a measure of that when Naruto is trying to summon Gamabunta in Naruto Part 1. He cannot do that without the aid of the Nine-Tails' chakra, and Jiraiya also fails to summon Gamabunta in the beginning of the Search for Tsunade arc final fight, when he summons Gamakichi instead because Tsunade drugged him. But that was a drug that literally affected her chakra control. Also, Naruto was terrible at chakra control as well, so he had to use much more chakra than usual to do things, just regular things. Imagine summoning a massive toad like Gamabunta. But then we see Kabuto summoning Manda after he got hit by Naruto's Rasengan, after he had to use pretty much every ounce of his chakra to heal himself out of Naruto's Rasengan damage, and he couldn't heal himself completely because he collapsed shortly thereafter. But still, like, a couple of minutes after Naruto landed the Rasengan on Kabuto was when Kabuto used his chakra to summon Manda for Orochimaru. Because Orochimaru couldn't do it, he didn't have his arms to use the summoning jutsu. So, it takes a decent amount of chakra, but it's not like it's gonna take 50% of your chakra reserves for you to summon Manda. And because Sasuke was not out of chakra there at the end of the Deidara vs Sasuke fight, he could do it. The second thing people complain about Sasuke summoning Manda there is because he did it too quickly. There was no way he would escape the blast. First of all, the blast, at least the initial part of it, was not terribly fast. It ignited Deidara's body into light after Deidara's body essentially became transparent, and that orb inside of him would explode, but this initial phase of the explosion could just be slower. Also, we know Sasuke at that point of the story is extremely fast, he can weave hand signs extremely fast as well, and once you use the summoning jutsu, it's instantaneous. The beast simply appears. It's not as if the summon has to charge up until it completely appears. No, it's instantaneous. We also know that casting ocular genjutsu is instantaneous. You just have to look at the creature's eyes, and Sasuke is gonna put it under genjutsu. And then Sasuke just had to slip into Manda's mouth to get protected. We see Sasuke summoning other snakes very quickly. Sure, they're not as large as Manda is, but as I said, even with gigantic summons, once you weave the hand signs, it's instantaneous. And when it comes to Sasuke putting Manda under ocular genjutsu, it also makes sense. There isn't a charge time for the ocular genjutsu, it just happens. When you look at the creature's eyes, it's done. And that makes a lot of sense because we see that Deidara's final explosion is not exactly a literal explosion. It's almost as if chakra expands outwards and consumes everything. Because think about this for a second, there is no shockwave to the C0 explosion. It's like this laser beam that expands and destroys everything, but it's not blowing things up. Otherwise, the forest that was around the C0 explosion would have been completely destroyed, and every single character from the Konoha battalion which were somewhat nearby and all saw the explosion from afar would have heard a massive shockwave. So because C0 was not a conventional explosion, it wasn't as fast, which gave Sasuke more time for him to bamf out of there with a reverse summon. And yes, the concept of reverse summoning is not something that was set up beforehand. Which yeah, I give you this one. It should have been set up beforehand, because when you use this for the first time to save yourself from this extreme situation, it can feel a little convenient. But the mechanics of the reverse summon work really well. Sure, it's never stated that if you are swallowed by your summon and the summon unsummons itself, you go with it. It just makes sense that this would happen because, for example, if your summon ate something when you summon it and it unsummons itself, would it leave what it ate behind with stomach fluids and whatever? No, it makes sense that it would bring its food back with it to where it came from, so it would also bring you if it swallows you. That's exactly what Manda does to Sasuke, protecting him from C0. Now, some people are also going to say that, oh, it doesn't make sense for Manda to survive the C0 explosion because it was massive, it was so powerful. And yeah, when Suigetsu summons Manda back, he pretty much instantly dies. But some people argue that Manda should have been obliterated and not been able to protect Sasuke in that situation, which is true if Manda had taken the full brunt of the attack. But it's very much implied that Sasuke bamfed out of there as soon as possible before the C0 completely expanded, before it took final shape, so Manda only tanked the initial brunt of the explosion. That's why it's very roughed up. We see those scorch marks around its body, but it's not obliterated. And that's how Manda dies. Sasuke uses it as a shield to protect himself from Deidara's C0. Some may say it's kind of a waste. I like this scene when that happens because it makes Sasuke look powerful and very clever. Also, him having dominion over such a large and gigantic beast makes the Sharingan feel special, and it also ties very well thematically with the Deidara fight because Deidara wanted to prove his art was stronger than the Sharingan, more beautiful than the Sharingan, but at the end, the Sharingan beat his art. He could never defeat the Sharingan, which was something he found beautiful and couldn't admit to himself that somebody else could produce something so artistic when he saw Itachi there for the first time. So Deidara losing to the Sharingan because he couldn't admit to himself that actually it is possible to create greater art than mine is just amazing. Manda does die there though, and Orochimaru never really summons it again. He was probably too terrified of seeing Manda after what happened to Tsunade and Manda and everything there, but because Sasuke could literally control it and hypnotize it with his Sharingan, then it didn't really matter if Manda was pissed. Manda didn't have a say. And realistically speaking, the only other opportunity for Orochimaru to summon Manda before that occasion, when Manda dies, would be in the fight against the Four Tails, which wouldn't be a bad idea, I think, if you don't consider Manda rebelling against you because he was so pissed off. I think Manda could have helped Orochimaru out there, but Manda would probably die in that fight if Manda fought against the Four Tails. Yeah, maybe he could use the skin change to get out of a tough situation a couple of times, but eventually Manda's chakra would run out. Just like Orochimaru's, to be honest. And yeah, Orochimaru was nerfed because his body was running out of time there, but it doesn't feel like the best alternative for you to use Manda against such a powerful, small opponent. It feels like a summon like that, a gigantic summon, is for you to use against somebody that's as large as the summon or a large amount of smaller but weaker enemies. And yeah, obviously Manda is outraged for what Sasuke did. Which, to be fair, even though Manda is very proud, arrogant, and snobbish, it makes sense for him to be pissed at what Sasuke did to you there. He'll literally use you as a human shield and sacrifice you so he could survive. Yeah, Manda dies. But that is not the final time we see Manda in action, no! And I bet many of you forgot about this, but Kabuto creates Manda 2, which he created by using Manda cells to essentially clone Manda but also enhance its powers. According to Kabuto, Manda 2 is stronger, bigger, and also has better sensory capabilities than Manda, the original. Manda 2 also doesn't seem to have a personality like Manda 1, so maybe Kabuto just programmed it to be completely obedient when he created it, which would make a lot of sense. You don't want a summon that can rebel against you and that's actively trying to kill you, even though that makes for a much more interesting character dynamic. From a mechanical standpoint for the character, it just doesn't make sense for the summon to be unreliable. And the strange thing about Manda 2, in my opinion at least, is that it has 4 limbs. 4 very slim limbs that it kinda uses to swim, I guess? Like, they feel like T-Rex's limbs that wouldn't be very useful because they're kind of small. Well, compared to the size of the body, that is. But what Manda 2 does is actually pretty impressive, because that snake manages to wrap itself around the Turtle Island's neck and suffocate it. It was about to kill the Turtle Island. And the Turtle Island is probably the largest creature in the Naruto universe, if you don't count the Divine Tree, that is. That thing is gargantuan, and Manda 2 was going to kill it. We can see the size of Manda 2 kind of compared to Kurotsuchi when she's flying up in the air, and the head of the snake is massive, so the entire snake is obviously going to be massive, and yeah, it does look bigger than the original one, just like Kabuto says. It's unfortunate that Manda 2 doesn't really do anything. After Kabuto captures Yamato, he runs away, and then Manda 2 unsummons itself, and it never shows up again. in the work or otherwise. Let's be real here, Manda too, even if Kabuto doesn't use to fight alongside himself against Itachi and Sasuke for instance, they could have just thrown that in the battlefield, I suppose. It's a massive summon that's stronger than the original Manda, which was around the same level as a tailed beast, so it could have been very helpful in the battlefield against the Alliance. I don't know, it just feels kinda weird that Kishimoto introduces this new concept of a second Manda, gives it like 5 panels of screen time and never used it again. I think he had something else planned for it, but was just like, well, I guess there isn't much time for it anymore. I cannot fit Manda 2 here. So yeah, it just never appears again. And that's Manda. Manda is extremely powerful. The strongest summon of the Shonen, and probably one of the strongest summons in the story, if you don't count Tail Beast, that is. Watch the Gamabunta video clicking right here. Please like the video, subscribe, and ring notifications. All those things are very helpful. They really help the channel out, and it only takes 5 seconds, so please do it. Thank you so much for watching.